What will a Biden presidency mean for the rest of the world? Trump's America First policy translated into a pullback from its position as a world power willing to work with others. The president was interested in deals for the US economy and unconventional diplomatic publicity coups rather than long-term strategic partnerships. His erratic policy moves have shaken many long-standing allies to the core, first and foremost, the European Union. The EU has relied and depended on the US since its creation, and Washington traditionally welcomed its rise to an economic power in its own right. Trump was the first president to actively try to weaken the Union. His repeated criticism of its trade policies, even declaring some EU exports a threat to American national security, hit them hard. Now European capitals are hoping for some kind of return to normality, delighted and relieved by promises Joe Biden has long made to repair the damage Trump did to international relations. As DW's chief political editor, I've witnessed countless speeches by German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who held up the multilateralist ideal against Trump's resistance over those past 4 years. When Biden talks about foreign policy, what he says fits with her approach. His speeches are peppered with talk of working together, needing allies and partners, and building networks. Biden has sent a clear message throughout his campaign that America's allies just had to keep faith and wait for a new president.
American security, prosperity, and our way of life require the strongest possible network of partners and alliances working alongside one another. Donald Trump's brand of American First has too often led to America alone.
This should calm nerves in Berlin and Brussels, as well as Tokyo and elsewhere, nerves that have been jangling over this past 4 years. Trump broke a post-war taboo by sowing doubts over US commitment to NATO, telling allies to pay up or else. Biden, on this point, would seem to mark a return to an American commitment to the alliance above and beyond economic interests.
NATO is at its heart, the very heart of NATO and our national security. More than that, it is an alliance of values. It's an alliance of values. Working cooperatively with other nations to share our values and goals doesn't make America, as it seems to imply in this administration, suckers.
But does that mean NATO will see a return to the good old days where the US was a generous, dependable mother of all allies? I ran Biden's comments by a leading transatlantic think tank. Karen Donfried, the president of the German Marshall Fund, told me that Europeans may be in for a surprise if they expect a return to strategic handouts without any strings attached.
There is an expectation on the part of many Americans when they think about our allies that our allies also need to bring things to the table. There's an expectation on the part of European allies that if Joe Biden is elected, that he will bring some things to the table.
So while European diplomats can realistically hope for calmer and safer political waters, the balance of give and take across the Atlantic seems to have changed for good. Donald Trump walked away from one international agreement after another and withdrew American backing for international institutions like the World Health Organization. Joe Biden has been clear he wants to return to treaties like the Paris Climate Agreement and deepen multilateral cooperation across the board.
Climate change, nuclear proliferation, international and transnational terrorism, cyber warfare, disruptive new technologies, mass migration. They're moving like Moore's Law is moving. None of them can be resolved by the United States alone.
Many of the organizations concerned will be delighted to welcome the US, with its deep pockets and operational experience, back into the fold. Donald Trump worked with dictators around the world in his quest for a better deal. Biden says he will only offer US support to countries who make commitments to democracy and human rights.
As president, I will ensure that democracy is once again the watchword of U.S. foreign policy. We only have one opportunity to reset this democracy after Trump.
He's already started calling out allies like Turkey, the Philippines, and Hungary for what he says are policies moving towards authoritarianism. They won't be the only countries he takes to task. Donald Trump's disinterest in common global trade rules effectively helped paralyze the World Trade Organization. Joe Biden says he wants to push current trade regimes forward, and he's in a hurry to set terms for future trade.
China can't afford to ignore half the global economy if we're united. That gives us substantial leverage to shape the future rules of the road, on everything from the environment to labor to trade to technology to transparency, so we can continue to reflect the democratic interests and values, America's interest and values, not China, not Russia's.
He says the West has no time to lose in staking out the principles and rules for the global economy's new digital era.
We have to ensure that 21st century technologies are used to promote greater democracy, shared prosperity, not to curb freedom and opportunity, either at home or abroad. As new technologies shape our economies and societies, we have to ensure that these engines of progress are bound by laws and ethics.
Big data technology is a significant factor in fueling distrust between the United States and China, but it's only one of many. China is one of the few foreign policy areas where Trump and Biden agree. They both see it as a key threat to US interests.
We need to get tough with China. If China has its way, it's going to keep moving and robbing US firms of our technology, intellectual property.
Biden is expected to maintain pressure on allies to reject Chinese firm Huawei's 5G technology. And that's not the only frustration that Republicans and Democrats share about Beijing.
When China joined the World Trade Organization, it agreed to a series of reforms that it has not put into place. And so there is a shared view that we need to be tougher with China on those agreements.
But there's also a number of global issues on which Biden is expected to seek closer cooperation with China.
There are a whole set of other issues where I believe a Biden administration would recognize the importance of working with China, whether that's to respond to the climate crisis, whether that's to manage a pandemic.
Rather than openly antagonizing Beijing, Biden is likely to try to work with China on some issues while trying to maintain a tough stance on others. Trump simply dumped the Iran nuclear deal designed to keep it from developing nuclear weapons. Biden has long trumpeted his intention to directly reverse that decision.
If Tehran returns to compliance with the deal, I would rejoin the agreement.
And while Trump's friendship with Kim Jong-un produced little more than bombastic pictures, Biden is planning a different path to stop him from going nuclear.
In North Korea, I will empower our negotiators to jumpstart a sustained coordinated campaign with our allies and others, including China, to advance our shared objective, and it is a shared objective, a denuclearized North Korea.
Biden says he's committed to preventing nuclear proliferation. Trump pulled many US troops out of Iraq and Afghanistan, seemingly with little consultation there or at home. Biden may be expected to review Trump's fast troop withdrawals, but there's little expectation he'll send troops back into those arenas, let alone take on more military engagement.
And we know from having watched Joe Biden when he was vice president in the Obama administration that he was reluctant about committing American treasure, whether that's troops or money, to what have now been called the never-ending wars in Afghanistan and Iraq.
Yet Biden will continually face the eternal question of how much military might he wants to use to promote American values and power. So while President Joe Biden will no doubt promote Western values, whatever international moves he makes, he'll have to prove that his policies are benefiting the folks back home. Because millions of Americans have lost their jobs during the COVID-19 pandemic, and midterm elections will be just 2 years away.
So he is going to have to put those issues of how you manage the pandemic, how do you solve the economic fallout of that pandemic, how do you heal the racial divisions in this country. There's a very long list of domestic political priorities that he will have to focus on. So it won't just all be about foreign policy and about those important relationships abroad.
For now, much of the world will be breathing a sigh of relief that the value-driven America they trusted and depended on could be back. But any honeymoon may be shorter than many are hoping for. Biden's United States will continue to be a demanding partner to its allies.